Well, Bishop Schneider is at it again, defending the Society of St. Pius X, which is something he is known for, and I'm very grateful to him for that. In fact, I do quote him a few times in my book, SSPX The Defense, which is coming out very soon. In fact, the cover was just made. We're just waiting on the final editor, so please stay tuned for that. It's right now it's sitting at about 250 pages, so it's a pretty comprehensive defense of the society, against pretty much all the accusations I could think of. I mean, I'm sure somebody will find something else because people do that, but anyway, I think it's pretty comprehensive. The Confraternity for Our Lady of Fatima is an apostolate that I support and that Bishop Schneider is sort of, I guess, the chaplain for, and they have these Q&A sessions every month, and I've been going through some of their videos because they're just so informative. It's so great to listen to the good bishop. And questions about the SSPX came up. And there were sort of two questions. One of them was there are accusations that the SSPX don't accept the whole Catholic faith, which is, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know. Rome has never said that. The Vatican's never said that. The Holy See has never said that. But I guess people on YouTube know better. And in fairness, it is the case a lot of the time today that people on YouTube do know better than the Holy See. So that's not the strongest argument in the world. I get that. I'm just trying to be facetious here. I'm just being funny. In any case, the SSPX has never been judged to be heretical. That's not even an argument that their most sort of intelligent detractors, I mean, they'd call them schismatics, but not usually heretical. But people are saying that now. So I guess if you run out of, it's kind of like when leftists run out of arguments and just start calling you racist. I think there's just nothing else to say about the society. It's just pretty clear that they're in the church, they're Catholic, and so on and so forth, that people are just starting to call them schismatics and heretics for fun at this point, because that's what liberals do. Anyway, so we're going to watch the first answer here to this idea that the SSPX doesn't accept the faith. And this is about a 5-minute answer, and then we'll pause. And then after that, this idea that the SSPX doesn't have sort of a normal mission in the church, we'll get to that as well.
They have to demonstrate which concrete parts of the Catholic faith the Society of Pius X is rejecting. I don't know. They do not reject nothing from the deposit of faith, and this is necessary to be a Catholic, to make the profession of faith as all the saints did, and they do the so-called Tridentine profession of faith. The Society of Pius X are doing this. It is the same profession of faith which did all the fathers of the Second Vatican Council. So, and when we do this, we are Catholics. And so we have not to establish new items to be a Catholic, as these, you mentioned, these authors are doing. I repeat, the church asked concrete points to be a Catholic. This in the profession of faith, the Tridentine Vatican so-called profession of faith, which was valid until 1967, until 2 years after the council. And so all the generations, since you are professing this, you are Catholic, and this is doing the Society of Pius X. And so the other question is the issue of the ordination of a bishop without the approval or the permission of a pope. This concrete item is not a concrete item of the deposit of faith, because it's what is deposit of faith that ordained bishop to be a Catholic must recognize the doctrine of faith, the dogma about the primacy of the Pope, the infallibility, and all the dogmas. And these they are doing, the bishops of the Society of Pius. They are professing all the dogmas concerning the papacy. And then the second condition to be a Catholic bishop is to mention the Pope in the Holy Mass. This is the most concrete expression of the communion, hierarchical communion with the Pope. And this did all the bishops of all the times in the, let us say, in the first millennium. It is a long time. This was the method. They were elected and ordained without the participation of the Pope, the majority of the bishops in the ancient church. But after their ordination, they expressed their communion with the Pope in different ways, by a letter sending to the Pope, and the Pope answered them that he recognizes them by mentioning him in the Holy Mass. And this was sufficient. And the Church could not go 1,000 years in an error with this concrete method of how a bishop expresses his canonical union with the Pope. In the Middle Ages, in the second millennium, was developed a kind of extreme papal centrism, exaggerated centricism in Rome. So the Pope wanted to control all ever more, and now we have, and after the First Vatican Council, this Roman centralism was extended ever more, and now with Pope Francis we have the peak of this, the culmination of this, to my opinion, non-healthy papal centralism. So we have to, again, to be very, to have a serene look and view of the entire 2,000 years, how the Church lived and the bishops expressed their union with the Pope. And so, and therefore, these arguments of these are basically not valid.
So to keep the lights on here at the Kennedy Report, we have actually begun selling a couple different products. Right now we have sacred frankincense oil. You can see that right there. Boom. You can find this on the store. And I'm going to show you a camera trick here. You see I'm out of focus. White thing. Come back in focus. I don't know why that works, but it does. In any case, this frankincense oil, you can find this in the link in the description of this video. Here's what is said about it. So it comes from the region of Oman, and getting this stuff into Canada, it was like trying to get nuclear plutonium. We had to get this one container of, I think it was a couple liters of pure frankincense oil, and it took months. Had to go through customs and all these sorts of things. I don't know why it was so difficult, but it's from this very exclusive region in the world. The story goes that this is the same region wherein the wise men would have got the oil that they brought Christ. Now, this is not a dogma of the faith. I'm not saying you have to believe it, but the reason they say that is because in the region where the wise men would have come from the east, this is a continually operative frankincense fabrication or production location that's been going on since before the time of Christ, and kings and noblemen used to get their stuff there. It's the best stuff in the world. You've maybe bought essential oils before, and if you have, you've probably bought them from companies that are run like sort of pseudo-pyramid schemes. Well, at the same time, they might be run by people who are in weird New Age religions like Mormonism. So if you're going to buy those things, it'd be nice to actually get them from somebody who shares the same values. In addition, we also have lanolin balm. If you know what that is, this is actually the oil taken from sheep's wool, and we've procured that as well. See, you got to do the autofocus here again. Boom. Isn't that magic? Look at that. There you go. I know here in Canada, in the winter, my hands get super dry and cracked just from the cold weather. I throw this on. It's a magic cure. Also, if you're somebody who works in the trades, you probably get calluses and things. And sure, it's nice to have rough hands. It shows you work hard, but at the same time, you don't want your hands bleeding all over the place. So check out the links in the description. Thank you for all your support. You're going to buy these products anyway. You may as well buy them from somebody who shares the same values. And last thing I'll say, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying that frankincense oil has been proven in any, capacity that I can, put my reputation on. But it seems to me there's a lot of health benefits. And if you look those up, you can find those pretty easily as well. Some of them, they say, are even helping with anti-cancer properties. Again, make that decision for yourself.
So basically what Bishop Schneider is saying here is that it's not a matter of the deposit of faith. It's not a matter of the deposit of faith to consecrate bishops in the way that the SSPX did, or it's not against the deposit of faith, so we can't say that that makes them heretics. But he also makes a good point, and he says that the SSPX the priests of the SSPX and so forth, they profess the Tridentine Creed. Now, it's important to remember that Bishop Schneider actually spent about a month with the Society of St. Pius X and has had many interactions with them. He was an official visitator from Rome, so he would know quite well, unlike many of the detractors who are not intimately in possession of knowledge of the SSPX from being priests and spending time at seminaries and so forth, but that's a whole other conversation. But he says, the council fathers of the Second Vatican Council said the Tridentine Creed, and that was sufficient for them to be Catholic. Well, if it's necessary to say a different creed after the council in order to be Catholic, that would mean the church changed dogma. And evolution of dogma is the heart of modernism, which would just prove Archbishop Lefebvre right. To be honest, it would probably true. If it was an official, it would probably prove the state of vacantists right, if we're going to go all the way through. So we can't really say that there was a change in the Catholic faith and that the SSPX saying the creed that all Catholics had said for ever somehow doesn't suffice for being Catholic, because that would just, again, be an admission that the church had basically defected. And he goes on to say that there has been this development in what Catholics believe about papal authority. Of course, papal authority is absolute. The Pope has supreme authority. He's, absolute insofar as, it's absolute insofar as the power that you could have as a Pope. We recognize him as the temporal and spiritual authority that is reigning and, is the vicar of Christ. We believe that. But absolute authority does not mean arbitrary authority. Supreme authority does not mean arbitrary authority. What does that mean? It's just simply impossible for the Pope to use his authority against the church. He can do it in the sense of a person who does it, but it's impossible for it to be valid. All authority comes from God. So if a man works against God's will, then that authority is invalidly exercised. How do we know when a pope is using his authority invalidly or unjustly? Well, we have the previous popes. This is the standard that we go by. We have tradition. We have the scriptures. We have the saints. We have the doctors of the church, and so on and so forth. If we look at what has always been believed and how things have always taken place, if a pope comes along and says, everyone has to do X, Y, and Z now, and no one's ever done that, and it's irreconcilable with the past, it doesn't matter if he says that you have to do it. If it can't be reconciled with the past, then it's not you that's judging him. It's the faith that's judging him. The Pope is subject to the Catholic faith. He's a Catholic. And in a way, the Pope is subject to the laws of the church insofar as he has to use them to govern. He can change them, but he still has to use them. I don't know why it is that people today have this idea that the Pope is almost like a demigod. I understand. I know some people call it the false spirit of Vatican I. I've read Vatican I. Actually, Vatican I is very strongly against evolutionism, by the way, and very, very creationist. I've read Vatican I. I've read, Pastor Eternus about the dogma of papal infallibility. And for sure, it definitely says supreme authority, let him be anathema if you don't believe it. And also not just over dogma, but also over discipline and things. But we have to assume that people who wrote these documents, these cardinals and bishops and so forth, they must have, they have an intellect. They can use their reason. We would assume that they would think that everyone else could use their reason. I've never understood why it's so difficult for a lot of Catholics today to reconcile the documents of Vatican I with tradition. Some people say, there's some traditionalists that say we have to rethink Vatican I. Personally, I don't believe that. I don't think we have to rethink Vatican I. I just think we have to actually follow Vatican I, which means we have to use our reason. Yes, the Pope is the supreme authority, but the Pope is not, it's not like the Mormon church where he can just change the tradition. He can't just have revelations and make new things to be the case. Everything that's defined is found in the tradition. He can't ratify a teaching that can't be found in the tradition. It's very simple. And even for disciplinary authority. Of course, a pope can have does have supreme disciplinary authority, but again, the pope is subject to God, and every creature that exists is subject to the natural law. This is a fact. So the pope's power must be subject to the laws of the universe, the laws of morality, the nature of justice. You know, you can choose to obey a pope when he's acting unjustly, but if the pope is acting outside of his authority, which is possible because he's not like some sort of demigod, it's pretty simple. I don't understand why it's so hard for people to believe that. It really is striking to me. You'd think in this age of so much tyranny in the church and in society that would be easy for people to believe. But there are a lot of traditionalists who still can't reconcile these things, and I really don't get it. I look at all of history and I see Catholics dealing with these questions, the great scholastics talking about resisting the Pope and so on and so forth, concrete examples of bishops resisting popes in the past, lay people even being parts of movements that resist bishops and popes and things like this. And it just seems very simple to me. It's not something you want to do. It's not something you want to be a part of. It's not like this is a great thing and we're so happy about it. But we have a faculty of reason, and all the doctrines of the church have to be interpreted in light of what's always been believed by Catholics. I don't know. I don't find it that difficult. In any case, here is Bishop Schneider talking about the idea that the SSPX does have an actual mission.
But it is a situation of extreme crisis of the church. We have to take into account this and emergency situation. And in an emergency situation, we have, this is an exception. Of course, a Catholic bishop has to receive concrete his mission from the Pope, but I repeat, in the first millennium, it was not in this way, as I already said. There was other kinds of recognition, tacitly and so on. But now, in the second millennium, with this new developed papal centrism, it is not this form, concrete, practical form of papal centrism. It is not the essence of our Catholic faith. It is a mode which can change. It was not so in the first millennium or the first centuries. So it is not, therefore, it is not necessarily a part of the deposit. This is, we have to distinguish the faith and the mode, the practice of the primacy. And therefore, I think they have a mission from the church, implicitly, the bishops of the Society of Pius X and the priests, because of the extraordinary difficulties of the church, and they are, as long as they are ready to completely submit themselves and their episcopacy, when they will come again, the Holy See will be occupied by popes and cardinals who are unambiguously and 100% traditional, what a pope must be 100% traditional. And this will come, surely. And they are ready, to my knowledge, to when there will come a pope who will be unambiguously supporting the tradition, liturgy, and faith, then they will, as Archbishop Lefebvre commanded them, you have then to go to the new pope, to the new traditional pope in Rome, to the Holy See, and say, we offer our episcopacy, and you can depose us or give us another mission. And this is, I assume that the bishops of the Society of Pius X are continuing to have this intention, as Archbishop Lefebvre said to them.
Yeah, so basically, it's pretty simple. We live in an extraordinary time, an extraordinary crisis. I don't understand why this is so hard for people to understand. As we've discussed, the action of popes, even from disciplinary matters, liturgical matters, etc., they are invalidly used when they harm the church. The pope has the power to build, not destroy. And he says the Pope has to be 100%, he said he must be 100% traditional. And this is true. This doesn't mean that the Pope must be a quote unquote, he doesn't mean he has to be a traditionalist in the stereotypical sense of, is the Pope like a LARPer of traditional things? Not that I'm saying traditionalists are LARPer. I'm just trying to make some distinctions here. But as Archbishop Lefebvre said in his book, Open Letter to Confused Catholics, he said, what is tradition? What sacred tradition is the deposit of faith. That's it. And it's exactly true. Like, what is traditional Catholicism? Traditional Catholicism, outside of the aesthetic of it, which is extremely important, that's not to downplay it, outside of the culture of it and so on and so forth, which can change country to country. Traditional Catholicism is Catholicism that is all of the faith. It's the entire deposit of faith, nothing more, nothing less. So if we find something in the deposit of faith, we have to believe it, and we can't act against it. That's what traditional Catholicism is. This is why the biggest sticking points, for example, for Archbishop Lefebvre, one of them was religious liberty. Religious liberty is not in the deposit of faith. And in fact, the Sensus Fidelium, going back as far as we can tell, is that this is, Gary Gru-Lagrange called it, if it's not a heresy, which I think he believed it was, it's still a grave error. Like, it's not part of the faith. Religious tolerance, kings and queens and presidents, you decide, sure, what's for the common good, what are we going to, accept here? And that's a matter of prudence. But the actual idea of like a positive right to any religion is impossible. And this is what's been pushed through the Vatican since Second Vatican Council. Archbishop Lefebvre's insistence on the liturgy. It was not that Lefebvre was against liturgical reform. He had participated in liturgical reform willingly, even in ways that some traditionalists probably wouldn't be comfortable with. He was willing to say certain things in the vernacular, and when he was in Africa, they would have like sort of African customs outside of the liturgy for funerals and things. He didn't have a problem with it. He said, yeah, there's obviously a line between sort of a folk custom that's just cultural and a pagan custom, and even some pagan customs can be baptized. We know this in the history of the church. So you just make that call. He was okay with that. But the reason why he protested was because the new liturgy was supplanting in the minds of Catholics something that, again, went against the deposit of faith. You have to believe that the Eucharist is a sacrifice. This is the deposit of faith. Believe in the Eucharist, the Mass, is a sacrifice. If the new Mass does a terrible job at presenting that, then it's a danger to your faith because it harms your understanding of sacred tradition, which is the deposit of faith. It's nothing about taking some stance about smells and bells. Smells and bells are important. But the new Mass with smells and bells is still just a Mass but the letter of it is damaging, at least over time, to your understanding of the deposit of faith. This is what Archbishop Lefebvre believed. This is what was believed by many bishops and cardinals at the time. He protested the change in collegiality. What's ironic about this is that if you actually look at the collegiality of this idea of how the church is run, by the Pope and the bishops since the council, it's almost it's weird. It's almost like a pseudo-Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox belief where the Pope is the first among equals in a sense, which I know some Orthodox believe. But at the same time, the Pope has this absolute authority. This is why there's been such a problem with how the church is governed. You'd think, for example, like you look at these German bishops, you look at all these bishops' conferences. I bet you didn't know this, but like in a lot of places, communion on the hand is actually illicit. The bishops' conferences don't actually have the authority to do that, and they haven't for a long time. I think in America, they technically don't. Like, it hasn't been renewed since 1976 or something like that. It's been a long time. It just became the custom, but the actual trial period was over, and I don't think they sought renewal from the Congregation for Divine Worship. I might be wrong on that, but there's something like that. How did the Canadian Conference of Bishops get away with basically saying that you could use contraception under good circumstances. How is this possible? Well, you'd think in an age of hyper-papalism that the Pope could just put his fist down and say, no, you can't do that. So on the one hand, we have this age of sort of papal centrism, as he says, but on the other hand, we have these bishops that can pretty much get away with whatever they want. And this was what Lefebvre was protesting. He was actually in favor of the Vatican I ultramontane understanding of the papacy, because that is consistent with tradition. He was not in favor of this idea of collegiality, where the bishops sort of act as a corporate body like an equal to the Pope, which it gets rid of the whole point of the Pope in the first place. So when Bishop Schneider says that the Pope needs to accept all of the tradition, this is true, because the Pope has to accept the Catholic faith, and tradition is the Catholic faith. So thank you, Bishop Schneider, once again, coming to the defense of the SSPX. I do quote him here and there, a bunch of quotes in my book. He's got a lot of great quotes about the SSPX. Stay tuned for that. It's going to be out soon. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. This has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time, God bless.